Right. Today we're working with section 10.7, day 2, box and whiskers plots. Make sure that you do day 1 before you do this lesson, because we're going to be using what you know about mean, median, mode, and range to be able to take and make a picture really out of all of those different ideas. Okay, so what we're going to do, our essential question today is, how can you use quartiles to represent data graphically? We always say a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So we're going to make a picture out of data. Interesting. So what we're looking for is quartiles. Now think about what that word might mean. If a quarter is 1/4 of a dollar, don't you think quartiles might have something to do with 1/4? It is. We're going to divide our data up into 4 parts. That's our goal today, is to take data and make a picture out of it by breaking it up into 4 parts. All right, pause this video if you need to and work at your own pace. Remember, there are notes that go along with this video. Make sure you print those out first if you can print those out. If not, just go ahead, grab a piece of paper and follow along with me. Here you go. Let's look at this. So let's look at this. It's called a box and whiskers plot. So this picture we're making out of the data is a box and whiskers, kind of like cat whiskers. You see how you got cat whiskers on the sides and you have this box in the middle? Really kind of cool. What this does is it breaks our data up into 4 parts, as I said before. And here's how the 4 parts are broken up into. The first quartile, or the first quarter, is 1/4 of your data. So this represents 1/4 of our data, okay? And then the last quartile, what we call the third quartile, is another 1/4 of our data. And then inside of our box, that's 50%, half of our data. Whatever's in that box is 50% of our data. So we can see with box and whiskers plots, looks kind of weird, but it seems, what you can see is the data really spread out? Is the data really close together? You can tell quite a bit about our data just by looking at a picture instead of having to look at a bunch of different data points. And I'll show you what I mean in a minute. Okay, so we have to be able to get these 4 pieces. We're going to go ahead, and actually, I know we said 50% of the data is in the box, but check this out. 1/4 is below so half is below the median, half is above the median. Those are the 4 quarters I'm talking about. And that 1/4 plus 1/4, of course, adds up to 50% if you were wondering about where I got 50%. Okay. All right, so we're going to find 5 numbers for us today. We're going to find the least value of our data, and we're going to put a dot. Okay. We're going to find the greatest value of our data, and we're going to put a dot. Then we're going to find the median, just like you did in the last lesson. And then we're going to do something called the first quartile and the third quartile. The first quartile is actually just the median of the lower half. So it's just the middle of the lower half. Okay. The third quartile is just the middle or the median of the upper half. So you have 5 data points that you've got to be able to find in order to figure out and draw a box and whiskers plot, okay, to make your data look like a picture. Okay, there's something also called interquartile range. Interquartile range, remember, range is how spread out is data, okay? And interquartile range, all you're going to do is you're going to take your third quartile minus your first quartile to see how spread out 50% of your data is. Okay, just what's in that box. So how wide is your data in the middle? Okay, what's cool about interquartile range is those outliers, those numbers that are a little bit different than other numbers, are not affected by our interquartile range. And remember that interquartile range represents, that box represents 50% of our data. Okay, so let's go ahead and show you how this works. On your paper, I've got it listed here for you. I have 24 data values, okay? So we need to organize this data, make a picture out of this data, and see how we can do that. Okay, so this says the number of pairs of footwear owned by each student in 7th grade class. Okay, so you counted how many pairs of shoes you had, and I recorded 24 results. Okay, I'm probably up here in the 28 or more category, but you guys could figure out where you are. But let's go ahead. Your first step when you're making this, you're going to organize the data. Your step 1 is to organize this from least to greatest. I have 24 boxes here to help me organize and make sure that I don't miss any data, because it can get confusing when you have a lot of data. Okay, so you might want to start with the smallest, you might want to start with the biggest, whatever your method is, you might want to cross out as you go so that you don't mess up any data. Okay, so let's go ahead and write our data points. So we actually have 3 2s up here. Let me go ahead and lock that into place so I can write on it here. Go. All right, so we actually have 3 2s. Oh, I'm still on highlighter. Let's grab that pen. There we go. So, and as I said, you can cross this data out as you go so that then you don't forget any data points. So I've got 3 2s, I've got 2 3s. Okay, I've got 3 4s. All right, I have 3 5s. And I have 2 6s. Okay, and I have a 7, 2 8s, a 9, a 10, actually 2 10s, and I have a 12, a 14, a 15, and I have a 25, and last I have a 28. Okay, I've got all of my data here. All 24 points are represented. So as I said, we're looking for 5 data values when we're looking for this. So remember, we're looking for the least value. Okay, so let's find that least value. Our least value is just whatever the smallest one is. So there's your least value is 2. Okay, your greatest value is 28. Okay, so those are actually going to be the end dots of our whiskers, and I'll show you that in a minute. But the next part is finding, I always cut it in half next, and I find the median. But there's 24 data points. If there's 24 data points, aren't there 12 on each side? There are. So we're going to go ahead and count 12 on each side. Let me get a different color here for you. You see that spot right there in between that? There's the median. Now, hopefully you got from the last lesson on 10.7 is if you're finding the median and it's in between 2 numbers, you got to add those 2 numbers and divide by 2. So this is 6 plus 6 divided by 2, which is 6. So your median here is going to be 6. Okay. And then we have our first quartile. As I said, our first quartile is the median of the lower half. So if you look to the left, that's our lower half. But we still have 12 data points. That's even amount. So our first quartile is actually in between 2 numbers again, which is right here. That is our first quartile, what we call Q1. Again, since that means the median of the first half, we're going to go ahead and take the number below, take the number above, 4 plus 4, divided by 2, and that's still 4 there. Okay, so 4 is our first quartile. And then our third quartile, the median sometimes can be called the second quartile. Sometimes I see this as Q2, just where we're getting Q3 here. So Q3 is, or your third quartile, is your median of your upper half. Again, that's going to be in between 2 numbers since your upper half has 12 numbers, which is even. So we're going to have to cut it right here, and that's Q3, or what we call the third quartile. And then we have 10 plus 10 divided by 2, which is 10. Okay, so we have our 5 numbers here. We have 2, 4, 6, 10, and 28 are 5 data points to be able to draw a box and whisker spot. ahead and put that onto a graph to make a sense out of this data, because a picture would make a lot more sense than a bunch of random data points, 24 data points just sitting on a piece of paper. So we're going to go make a picture out of this data. Let's go check it out. Okay, so here's our picture. As I said, what we're going to start with is we're going to start with your smallest value. I need to lock that in place again. There we go. Okay, we're going to start with your smallest value, which is 2. And go ahead and you make a dot. Notice that's on 2. You're going to do this above a number line so you can see it. Our highest data point that we had was 28 pairs of shoes. Hopefully those of you out there thinking, oh yeah, I've got 28 pairs of shoes. Some of you might only have 2. Okay. Try to figure out where you are on this graph. And then we said our median. Our median was 6. So there's our median right there. Okay. Now notice median has a little line. Okay, and it has a little dot. See that line? See that dot? Okay, we're going to make a box around that. So the first thing I always do is just make these dots. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and do first quartile. Your first quartile here, we said was 4. So that's why we have a dot right here at 4. And then our upper quartile or third quartile, we had as 10. Okay, now remember, when we say this interquartile range, okay, we're saying that 50% of our data here, so 50% of our kiddos that we surveyed about how many pairs of shoes they had between 4 and 10 pairs of shoes in that box range. That's 50% of our data. So 50% of my kiddos had between 4 and 10. Our interquartile range would be 10 minus 4, which is 6. So pretty close data there. We do have kind of an outlier here at 28, a lot more than some of the other students, and a lot, that's quite a long whisker here on the right, a little bit different than the rest of the group. Remember, when we're looking at this data, a quarter of the students had between 2 and 4 pairs of shoes. Half the students had between 4 and 10 pairs of shoes. And another quarter of the students had between 10 and 28 pairs of shoes. So breaking that up into quarters is what a box and whiskers plot does. Let's go ahead and analyze a little bit with our box and whiskers plot. So I'm going to look at this. This is example 2. So I'm going to compare and contrast some test scores. So maybe I have quite a bit of data from a lot of students here. So we're looking at 2 6th grade achievement tests. And the same group of students took both tests. The students took one test in the fall and the other test in the spring. I'm actually going to do part B first. What do you think? Which one do you think might be the fall and might be the spring? Do you hopefully do better in the spring after learning a little bit more? I agree. Let's check this out. If I look at this bottom one, see how my lowest data point is 30? And then the one on the top here, my lowest data point is 52. In both, I still had this 100, you know, I always got that student that gets that 100%. But if we look, our data looks like we did a little bit better on this top graph. So I'm going to call this the spring, because hopefully it was this student that went from a 30 to a 52. So in the fall, they had a 30. And in the spring, they got better and they got a 52. So we can kind of look at that. So that was my decision with that. What else I'm noticing is you see the box on the spring on the top. You see how it's, if you look, it's a little bit more concentrated. It's not as spread out. And what we can do is we can find the interquartile range to prove that. So if we look at the interquartile range of each of these, remember the interquartile range, I call it IQR, don't get confused. If I took 80 minus 65 there, 80 minus 65 has a spread of 15, okay? So, and then I look at the interquartile range for the fall, okay? And I can take 70 minus 45, and that's 25. So do you see how my data, 50% of my data is a lot more spread out in the fall than in the spring? I had a lot more or less variability in the spring than in the fall. So when it says compare and contrast those test results, I think there's less variability in the spring. Okay, and the interquartile range is definitely larger in the fall than it was in the spring. Let's take a look up there. All right, let's go ahead. Here is your closure for today. Your closure, you can go ahead and pause this video. I want you to try and make a box and whiskers plot out of these data points that you see here. Remember, you need 5 data points. You got to have your least value, your largest value, your first quartile, median, and your third quartile. Pause this video, see how you do. And I'm going to go ahead and give you the answer now. Turn this video back on. Here you go. Hopefully you did well there. If you didn't, find those mistakes, fix them, and we'll see you for the next video. Have a good day, guys.